Howdy, howdy. Welcome back. We were going to talk about dump valves and how it affects the converter and some stuff like that. But one of the guys I was talking to suggested that we do something that shows where the fluid comes from, where it starts at. So I thought, well, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Maybe it would help understand the dump valve a little bit and the converter a little bit to know where the fluid comes from to begin with. So that's what I'm going to show today. I got some used parts out, and we'll go over it and kind of show you what we're talking about here. All right, so here's a pump stator assembly, and here's the basic pump itself. These are, like I said, this is some used stuff, old junk that I got out just to show everybody. So here's your pump stator assembly. Here's your pressure regulator valve. And your pressure regulator valve basically sits in there right here when it is at rest. The spring is on this side, the valve, and then here's all your ports, okay? And you see the void here, the little ring here, and I'll explain what that does. We'll slide the valve back in the pump. And here's where it is. So this is basically with the spring all the way closed, where it has maximum line pressure. And if you look right here, here is your suction side. This comes from the filter, comes up, goes around, goes into the pump gears. It compresses the oil, comes out the top as pressure. So it comes over to the pressure regulator valve. This is just a little signal to even the valve out. But it comes over here to the pressure regulator valve under the pressure side. This is pressure, so it's built in here. This passage is this passage. So this has got an opening in it, and it comes out here, and it runs around the passage and goes into the case, and this word goes to the manual valve. So this is your line pressure coming from your pump that goes to the manual valve. So we have got pressure on this side. Your built-in pressure, it's coming up into this part of the passage. And here's where your valve runs 90% of the time. The valve's pushed down against the spring because it's built-in line pressure. You've got 200 pounds or whatever your spring pressure is. It's cracked this passage here up. So you've got a little bit of oil coming around the suction side and going right back into the pump. Now, and you've got this side open because your converter feed hole passage is open. And of course, there's your converter feed that we put the orifice in, and it comes out here. Now, when this valve, like I said, it runs here 90% of the time. But when you get, as it goes up right here, it's like you've got a leak or you're getting a high demand, low engine speed and a high demand, the valve will ease back up here. And look what it does. It shuts the recirculate. So there's part of your you know, it's bleeding line pressure off into your suction side. Well, and now it's blocking it off because it's got demand. Demand's coming up, so it blocks it off. You still got a little bit of converter feed happening right here. You see I'm moving it through this orifice. But as demand keeps going up and it can't keep that 200 pounds up, the valve keeps sliding up, and then now it's all the way against the wall. So it's got maximum line pressure. There's no return for the suction side, and there's no converter feed. The converter feed is shut off because this thing is going, hey, we've got a leak. We're trying to keep pressure up. We need to send every bit of fluid that we can have available to the valve body so we can keep the valve body supplied, so the valve body will keep the clutches on. So it shuts the converter feed off right here. Like I said, though, 90% of the time it does run in here. And it feeds the converter, or it comes up this passage, feeds the converter feed out here, goes in the converter, feeds inside the converter, and now when it comes out of the converter, it's coming out through. It comes in the shaft. It comes in the shaft and comes out here. Okay? Comes all the way in and it comes out here. The shaft is solid in the middle right here. So it comes out the hose inside the stator tube. When it comes inside the stator tube, it fills the inside of the stator tube. You've got a bushing on this end, bushing on this end, so it can't pass the bushing. It goes in this hole. You look inside there, I don't know if you can see it, but if you look in here, between the two bushings is a passage. It comes out, and this is the passage. So it comes here. Fluid from the converters coming out and going to your outside, your bottom cooler line, which is your outside. So it's running to the cooler through the lines, and now it comes back in. When it comes in the top line, runs around, comes in here, and goes through this passage. This passage comes out here, right? When it comes out this passage, we're back to our input shaft. It comes out on the back side of the bushing, which is down in here against the drum. There's a passage here. So it's going in this passage and coming out the center of the shaft. When it comes out the center of the shaft, here's your output shaft. So it comes out the input shaft in the center and goes into and this is right up against the output shaft basically, and it goes in the output shaft and runs down and starts feeding everything else. Now, and it feeds the back of the case and everything. Now, there is a lube circuit that goes in the valve body to the back of the case too, and later I'll show you what that does. But that comes from the valve body. It's just bled through the valve body into the back of the case. And it only does a couple of things. It doesn't feed the majority of the gear train in the back. So, but as you can see, that's how the fluid is run. And like I said, when this thing is running, the valve is here 90% of the time. And then as it rolls up to keep line pressure up, when demand goes up, it shuts the suction side off. It doesn't recirculate it anymore. So 100% of the oil that's going to the pump is coming through the filter. When this thing is running like this, you're only getting you're probably getting a 10% or a 20% bypass. So the filter's only pulling, 75 or 80% of oil that it's using through the filter. And then, like I said, when the valve goes up, you actually close your converter feed. No cooler flow, no converter feed, because it's trying to keep as much demand to the valve body so the valve body can keep the clutches on. That's more important right at this point. Now, I'll tell you a quick little story about something that happened one time to me. And it has to do with the pressure regulator deal and stuff. I had a guy call me, had a Turbo 400 in his car, and it'd been in there for a little while. It'd been in there probably, 80 runs, 60 runs, 80 runs. All of a sudden, it stopped working. No forward gears, no back gears, no, it stopped working. So I'm like, he called me and we were talking about it and stuff, and I go, okay. I said, it sounds like it possibly broke a pump, or maybe it broke a input shaft, or something happened. So I said, do it before you pull it out. Take a line, put a line pressure gauge on it and check the line pressure. He's like, well, I don't have a line pressure gauge. I said, okay, pull the cooler line off and crank it up and see if you have any converter flow. He calls me back and he says, no, I have just a little drip out of it. Nothing, no converter flow, cooler flow. I said, okay, well, pull it out and let's look at it. So he pulls it out, brings it to me. First thing we do, because you don't have to pull the pan or nothing to get the pump out of it, we zip the pump out of it. Because I thought, well, the pump's probably broke. We zip the pump out of it. Look at the pump. The pump's like brand new. It's fantastic looking. I'm like, okay, well, it's not a pump. So we start looking at it, make sure the gasket isn't blown out or something. I said, okay, let's flip it up, pull the pan off of it. We pull the pan off of it and we're looking, and I'm like, man, okay. Well, the pump feeds the manual valve, and I reach over and I grab the lever and I move the lever back and forth, and I'm like, I look at the manual valve, and only this part of it, there's where your rooster cone goes in it. Only this part of it is moving. Here back is gone. It had broke the manual valve and pushed it back into the case, into the valve body, and it was the line from the pump was going into the valve body and feeding the manual valve, but it wasn't sending it nowhere. It was just broke and everything was bleeding off. It was running right out the back of the valve body port. So that's just an example of, okay, you've got a major leak in the system. The pressure regulator valve's all the way shut. You have no cooler flow. So even though we took the line off and there should have been some cooler flow, if there was line pressure there and the pump was good, there was none. So that's just a little deal that happened. He thought, the pump was bad, or we all thought the pump was bad or something, but it wasn't. It was just bleeding. It had such a massive leak at the manual valve that the pressure regulator spring had pushed all the way shut and shut the converter feed off. So that's an example of why how that happens. But later we'll get into the dump valve and the converter, how it affects the converter and stuff. But right now I just wanted to show you where the converter charge oil comes from and how it gets to the cooler and how that affects it. Everything that's coming out that cooler line, 100% of it is going in that converter first. So it's feeding the converter. There's where 90% of the heat of the transmission is made, is in the converter. If it wasn't for a converter, If you had like the old clutch turbo deals where you had a clutch in there, you wouldn't even have to run a cooler because the oil wouldn't get that hot. But the converter makes 90% of the heat. So it's going in the converter, feeding the converter, cooling it, and making it work with hydraulics, and then coming out and going into the cooler line, into your cooler and stuff. And then it runs back in and runs into the lube circuit because now you've got the oil cooled down. So it's running into the lube circuit and lubing everything and going back into the pan. So hope this makes you understand where your cooler line and your converter pressure has to do with each other. And with that orifice, that orifice that feeds your converter flow, converter charge, is relevant with how much line pressure. Well, if you've got 200 pounds of line pressure coming up through this orifice and then feeding the converter, you say you got 100 thousandths orifice in your converter feed. Well, if you raise, and it's, let's say you got 200 pounds of line, you got 100 thousandths orifice, and you've got 100 pounds of converter pressure. Well, if you go in there and raise your line pressure up 30 pounds, it's going to raise your converter pressure up as well. But because you have that orifice, and it isn't going to go from 100 pounds of converter feed to 130 when you raise 30 pounds. It's only going to probably raise it about 10 or 15 pounds. Maybe 10 pounds is what is going to raise it normally. So, because you are running it through that orifice. Hope this helps. I know I'm kind of all over the place a little bit, but in the next one, we'll get into the converter. We'll have a converter cut open, show you where it goes through the converter and how it works, and then into the dump valve or none, into the transmission, whether you use a dump valve or not, and so forth and so on. So, hope this helps. And like I said, we'll get into the next one. Guys, please like, comment, subscribe, and see you on the next one. Thanks.